On our call tonight, welcome to Scholars Choice's monthly educational webinar. And a huge Happy New Year to everybody on the call as well, as this is our first time connecting in 2014. So my name's Reagan, and I'm very excited to be a part of the team hosting another full year of webinars for you guys. And just as in the past, I'll be walking you through this whole process of this call and making sure that it runs smoothly. So many of you on this call are not only familiar with our webinar program and my voice by now as well, but for many of you, it's your first time joining us this evening. So I'll fill you in a bit about why we do these webinars and why we host them on a monthly basis. Because we do get a lot of emails asking if there's a fee, and I know it's pretty common to be charged for online events like this, but this is not the case here. So Scholars Choice is a brand that's really built on a commitment to create and encourage educational excellence. And we believe it's important for parents and teachers to be able to access resources that enable them to become empowered and inspired to educate our future generations. So it's our mission to help the children in your lives to excel, attain more, and be happy. So as parents, teachers, grandparents, and various other guardians of young ones, we know very well that it takes a village to raise a child, and we're all going to work towards this same goal together. So it's Scholars Choice's hope that the free resources like this webinar series and the other resources like our online blog and our e-guides, that they can all really help you help the youth in your home and your classrooms. So I'm just going to walk you through a few tips to remind you of, just in order to make the webinar really successful for you. You will notice that your microphone is on mute. So the whole audience is on mute except for myself and the guest expert, and that's just for the sake of keeping the background noise low. So you will remain on mute during the duration of the call. And when it comes to asking questions, this is definitely still something that we encourage. So if you go over to your dashboard, the control panel that you have been using to access this call with GoToWebinar, you will find a little panel called Questions. And if you click that one, pop it down, it opens up a question box, and you can type on in it anything you would like to ask, and we'll try to get to as many of those inquiries at the end. So we can kind of test it out right now, just to make sure everybody can hear me loud and clear. If you want to cruise on over to that question box, you can just type in via hello and test yours out. Perfect. Awesome, tons of them flowing in, so everybody has got access to it there. Perfect. So as you ask those questions, like I said, you're more than welcome to ask them throughout. It won't interrupt anything. I'll just take them into consideration to pose to Judy at the very end of the call. So I'll remind you as well to just keep your questions a little more general instead of highly specific, because that way we'll be more likely to take the question because it can be answered in a way that's relevant to a majority of the audience. Okay, perfect. So we will get started here. And I will let you know to get ready for another familiar voice. We're so honored to have Judy Arnall, the past guest expert, of our wildly popular webinar, Discipline Without Distress. Many of you may remember that one. Everybody logging into the call now. Judy's one of Canada's leading professional speakers on non-punitive, respectful parenting and family relationships. On top of being a professional member of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, a distinguished member of Toastmasters, and a certified Canadian family life educator, Judy's also the best-selling author of multiple books, including the very popular and previously mentioned Discipline Without Distress, which many of you may have also picked up in our stores after her last webinar. And it's actually not just been in high demand now from our audiences, but it's been translated into 5 languages. So it looks like parents and teachers worldwide now are really benefiting from all the knowledge Judy's sharing. So Judy, we are very thankful to have you back leading us through one of your expert presentations, and this is such a unique topic at that. And I know you have quite a bit to share, so I'll allow you to take it away.
Thank you, and thank you for having me back. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight. And so let's get going. I have a lot to present on, and I just wanted to mention that this is copyrighted Professional Parenting Canada, and permission is given to Scholars Choice to use the webinar for educational purposes. So you did a great job introducing me. I will just run through it again. I am a Canadian certified family life educator. I speak at conferences, and we also do a lot of webinars ourselves through Professional Parenting Canada. We do webinars on every aspect of parenting as well as some education topics. So if you're interested, be sure to check that out. I'm also a mom of 5 kids. They range in age from 11 to 22. I have 4 boys and a princess in the middle. And they're a lot of fun these days. And I got to mention, I have a new book coming out in a couple months called Parenting with Patience. So stay tuned for that one. It's a whole bunch of tips on how to stay calm and parent on. So how did I get interested in multiple intelligences? Well, I'm not a teacher in a classroom, but I am an adult educator, which means that I teach adults. And I'm also a speaker, so I teach large groups. So I became very interested in how people take in information and where their intelligences lie through my education work and conferences that I took through parent education. Through my kids, I have facilitated their schooling. They've done everything from public, private, online correspondence, French immersion, homeschooling, and unschooling. And currently I have 3 in university, so if you like this presentation, please feel free to hire me. I have to pay for all that. But it was interesting to know, I did a lot of book reading and research on multiple intelligences. And our agenda tonight, this is for all you logical, intelligent people out there who like a pattern and order and structure. This is what we're going to cover in the next hour. And then we're going to throw it open for questions. When I do this presentation live, I actually present it in all 8 intelligences to touch everybody in the audience, which is really a challenge when you're doing a webinar because you're somewhat limited. The one intelligence that people are not going to get is probably the interpersonally intelligent people, but maybe you could watch the recording later with a group of people and stop it and have a group discussion on some points. So I'm going to play music tonight. I'm going to play some nature sounds. I'm going to show you how to incorporate these things into your teaching to hit those learners that have that particular intelligence. So when I ask people, what is smart? What do you think of when you hear the word smart? People think book smart. So they think of the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. But there are some people out there who disagree with that and think that there are a lot of different ways that people are smart in terms of they can be musically smart, they can be people smart, they can be life smart. And I totally agree with those people in that we need to expand our concept of what is intelligent. It used to be that IQ tests would measure 3 intelligences. And now people, careers, and especially with our growing technology, we have different ways to get information out there and different ways people can take it in. The concept of multiple intelligences was started by Dr. Howard Gardner, who wrote a book called Frames of Mind in 1983. He's a psychologist that pioneered the fact that people have many intelligences, not the 3 that we currently think of. Now, Dr. Thomas Armstrong wrote a book later called 7 Kinds of Smarts, and that I found to be a little bit of an easier read in layperson's language. And the picture you're seeing on the screen is actually multiple intelligences talked about in a museum in Sydney, and I thought, this is great, I got to take a picture of that. But the book actually outlines all about multiple intelligences. If you want to read either of those books, I would recommend both of them. It's where I get the information for this webinar from. And I love this comic. I won't read it out, but basically it's saying that everybody has different talents, abilities, aptitudes, and intelligences, and we must respect them. And is it really fair to ask everybody to do the same exams and to do the same, to expect to go through the same type of learning that may not fit them? And I love this quote from Margaret Mead. If we're to achieve a richer culture, we must weave one in which each diverse human gift will find a fitting place. So here's a question. A lot of people think Einstein is very smart, but not enough people know that he didn't begin to read till he was about 9 years old. So maybe he wasn't on that linguistically intelligent scale, but certainly he had intelligences in other areas. So let's look at them. There's currently 8 intelligences, 8 categories. And what an intelligence is the capacity to solve problems or to fashion products which are valued in one or more cultural settings. And in this model, all people are intelligent. There is room for everybody to shine in this model, no matter what their intelligence is. So intelligence is time, place, and culturally specific to how it's valued. Right now, in the last 16 years since we've had the internet, probably there are certain intelligences which are more valued right now in our culture. And I definitely know for people in my age group, the younger generation, just the way they take to electronics, we call it digital intelligence, although it's not one of the 8 I'm going to talk about. But that is definitely valued in our culture right now. So within each intelligence, people have areas of strength and weaknesses. And that's kind of how intelligences differ from learning styles. Learning styles tend to label people, and rather than ask, am I word intelligent or linguistic intelligent, what we should be asking ourselves is, how am I linguistically intelligent? In what ways am I word smart? Now, Gardner uses the terms linguistic, logic, spatial, and Armstrong uses the terms word, logic, spatial. So he uses a little more layperson's language to describe these, and I'm going to too, just because it makes things a little more simple. So the top 3 intelligences tends to be the ones that are most valued in schools and are considered academic intelligences. Although Howard Gardner does not make that distinction. He puts all 8 intelligences on the same value scale. But unfortunately, when there's funding cuts in schools, what are the intelligences that get cut first? It's usually programs like arts, drama, gym, field trips, all those things that incorporate not the 3 word, logic, spatial intelligence, but more the music, the interpersonal, nature intelligence. Now, every culture values all 8 of these intelligences, but not in the same way. For example, we value reading and writing in our culture, but there's 2 other ones. There's speaking and listening, and they don't quite get the same time in schools that reading and writing does. Although things are changing now with our electronic society. And we can develop all 8 intelligences to a certain level of mastery. A few of us develop 1 or 2 very, very strongly, and we tend to lag behind in others. So most of us stand out in a few, are moderate in some, and lag behind in a few. So in this model, all of us would possibly have learning disabilities. So we shine and we have learning disabilities because some we're not very strong in. So let's go through these. Oh, sorry, one more thing I want to add. In prehistoric times, the body intelligence was the most valued, obviously because you needed to run to get away from those mammoths and survive. So that was very culturally valued. In the 50s, Silicon Valley and the logical math people who learned computer programming, they weren't considered as valued back then, but certainly now they are. And many, many tasks and jobs involve several intelligences. So we don't want to focus or label someone with one intelligence. It's where they're stronger and more moderate too. Now, we're not too sure what's ahead for the future. We may have to demand intelligences that aren't considered so important today because things change very fast. For example, in our global society, more than ever, people need people skills because we're not just dealing with our little neighborhood or community or country. We're dealing with other countries over the internet. And with information becoming increasingly available, we need more forms to take it in according to our intelligence. Usually how they learn is rooted in their strongest intelligence. And we tend to favor and love what we're doing based on what we're good at. And we're usually good at things, and those are our intelligences. So just remember, we have 8 intelligences and can develop them all to a certain level. Let's look at each one of them. The first one is linguistic intelligence, or what we say is word smart. So people who are word smart, they have sensitivity to sounds, meanings, the structure of words and language. They have an aptitude for reading, writing, speaking, and listening. This intelligence is most valued in our culture right now and probably most universal. In elementary school programs, most of resources go to helping kids learn to read in grade 1 to 3, and then helping kids reading to learn from grades 4 to 12. Yet things are changing too. Oral tradition has been around from prehistoric times, but nowadays, even more so, we need speaking, especially with webinars, and listening skills. Listening is so important when you're dealing with global organizations and communities. So children who have this intelligence love books. They love storytelling, poetry. They love the rhythm of words and jokes and anything to do with the written word. Now, when you think of careers, you probably think of writer. But there's many more careers. There's librarians, archivists, editors, translators, speech pathologists, radio announcers, journalists, lawyers, secretaries, proofreaders, and many, many more. The next one is the logical intelligence, or what we say number smart. These are people who have the ability to learn abstract concepts, see patterns, symbols, make calculations, and they love order, problem solving, and number games. Now, these children need some formal operational thinking for logic, which kicks in around the onset of adolescence, like about 13 years. You really start to see that ability come out then. But only about 30 to 40% of people use formal operation thinking. So for many people, the algebra they learned in grade 8, they don't really need in their day-to-day lives. In the past, numeracy problems had too much focus on rote memory and computations and drills, and not enough on the wider arena of problem solving and estimation and probability, which we're seeing now more in the curriculum in the schools, is a wider, we're also seeing a lot more spatial teaching in terms of mathematics, which is really good. When you think of careers here, first one you think of is probably engineer, but there are many others. There's auditors, accountants, statisticians, computer programmers, insurance underwriters, economists, bookkeepers, and of course your science teachers. The next one is spatial intelligence, and this one we call picture smart. So these are people who use mental imagery to absorb knowledge. They have a sensitivity to art, to pictures, diagrams, visualization, movies, flowcharts, graphs, decision trees, maps, photographs, and designs. This is my strongest intelligence, and this is one I love to teach in. So you'll see my PowerPoint will have tons of pictures in it and movies. I just love teaching in this, but not everyone's going to learn in this one. Now, most kids stop drawing or painting by about age 10 just because they recognize that their pictures don't look like the real things, unless they do have this intelligence in their artwork. But these are people who learn through those modes. And it's important to think we are moving this way in our icon-based society. Now, icons are replacing words. It used to be that Connects and Lego instructions were the only things that came with picture instructions instead of words. But I got a scanner for Christmas, and the instructions were totally in pictures. So you can see this is the generation we're moving to. If you look at our cell phones and our apps, we're all moving more toward icons rather than words and language. It can really throw some people off, though, that are really linguistic intelligent and want the words. Canada is one of the biggest users of YouTube, and on there you can find videos to show you how to do anything, from ironing a shirt to building a gaming computer to cooking chicken dinners. So Shakespeare did plays rather than written words, and in the past we read Shakespeare through the written word, but now we can go back to watching plays and movies of Shakespeare and still hear the word but also look at it too. Careers. When people think of this, they think of artists, but there's many, many other careers. There's engineers, surveyors, architects, urban planners, graphic artists, interior decorators, inventors, pilots, sculptors, photographers. So many careers there. The next one is the bodily kinesthetic intelligence. So this is body smart. These are people who have skill in their gross motor and their small motor skills. So an athlete may be intelligent in gross motor, a surgeon may be intelligent in fine motor skills. They have balance, coordination, endurance, flexibility. This is not my intelligence. I go to aerobics class or Zumba, and I'm always 6 steps behind the teacher. It just doesn't work for me. These children are sensitive to touch and movement. They like to dance, they like role play, they like sports, they like crafts. And they feel things in their body. So when they say they have a gut feeling, they think and feel and learn in the body. Piaget, the psychologist who's the foremost authority on cognitive development, says that the first 2 years of a child's cognitive development is learned through the body, through their touch, their taste, and their movement, called the sensory motor stage. And that's true. You look at small children and they experience the world. Their whole brains are driving them to touch things and put things in their mouths. The other thing about this is people who have this intelligence have to move to learn. So, for example, I was reading books to my children when they were young, and one child just couldn't sit still, jumping on the sofa, running around, and I thought, that's it. I'm not going to read to him anymore. He's not listening. And half an hour later, he tells me the whole story. He has been listening, but he's taking it in through movement. So if you're one of these, you might want to watch this webinar again on the treadmill, and that way you can take it in better. One thing, when speaking, the average conference attendee in a 3-day conference looks at 600 PowerPoint slides. And that doesn't work for a lot of people with these intelligences. It works for the linguistic, the logical, the spatial people, but not the body, the music, the interpersonal, intrapersonal, or the nature intelligence people. They need information presented in different ways. So there are much different ways to incorporate, especially when you're speaking or teaching a large class. Get them up and moving. Give them an activity to do something. This was a video I was gonna show you, but I couldn't get it working with it going down the transmission line. But in a large crowd, there are many things you can do to engage that person, the bodily intelligent people. And you can touch the interpersonally intelligent people too by putting them into groups, assigning group works, get them doing exercises. Many ways to do that. It doesn't have to be all PowerPoint. I wish I could do that with you through a webinar, but I'm a little challenged here. Okay, so typical careers for body intelligence are, people think actor, or dancer, or Olympian, sports person, but there's many more. There's physical therapists, recreational workers, models, farmers, mechanics, carpenters, factory workers, choreographers, forest rangers, and jewelers. Who would know? The next one is music intelligence, and these people are music smart. With music smart people, I like to play music. These people can understand and create harmony. They can keep time and stay in tune. And they just get the rhythm of music so fast. I'm not one of those, again. I wish I was, but I'm not. Music stimulates creativity. So research shows that background music can help these students absorb languages, math algorithms, and science concepts. Rhythm actually helps us remember information. Instead of listening to a lecture about how to spend time with your kids, many people can just listen to the song Cats in the Cradle and get the same points, but in a very musical way. When you think of careers, you probably think of singer or instrument player, but there's many more careers. There's piano tuners, disc jockeys, music therapists, songwriters, studio engineers, conductors, choral directors, and many other types of careers. When I do present to large groups, I like to play music in the background for small group work and before and after presentations, because it just kind of helps people relax, get them into mode. It speaks to people who are musically intelligent. The next one is what we call interpersonal intelligence. People smart. These are people who have an adept understanding of others and their feelings. They love being group leaders, and they can work collaboratively with others. They're able to decipher nonverbal communications, which account for about 60 to 90% of all information transmitted between people. They're able to figure out group norms and who's the dominant individual in a group, who touches who controls the flow of information, and patterns of eye contact, and they pick it up like it's an extra sense. And these all vary with culture, but they are culturally specific. These people have an ability to deal effectively with other people in negotiation, in influence, persuasion, and resolving conflict. Managers spend about 50 to 90% of their time engaged in interpersonal communication with bosses, subordinates, and clients. This is one intelligence which is kind of hard to incorporate into online learning. Online learning can incorporate most of the other intelligences, but this one's a difficult one, is to get people together talking to each other or to read people's nonverbal cues. This social savvy is not typically a part of most intelligence tests, and yet it may be the most important one for survival. 80% of people who lose their jobs at work don't because of their technical ability, but because they don't relate well to other people. And success with relationships is success in one's personal life. It helps with emotional and physical health. As we're moving more from an I culture to a we culture, we need this intelligence more and more in schools, businesses, and our relationships. This is one of what we call emotional intelligence, is to read other people and discern their emotions. Typical careers people think are, oh, managers, but there's many more. There's principals, teachers, arbitrators, personnel workers, anthropologists, counselors, nurses, salespeople, travel agent, realtor, adult educators, and police officers. The next one is what we call intrapersonal intelligence. It's the other half of emotional intelligence, is understanding one's own inner life of emotions, goals, and intuition. So it's being self-smart. One is sensitive to their personal strengths and weaknesses. You often see children like this, and they're called early maturers, or they're considered old souls. They just have a wide range of knowledge about the way people and the world and relationships work. These people love solitude. It's a therapeutic emotional support for them. And they're very in tune with their own emotions. It's been said that if you want to teach someone, don't get a hook into their head, get a hook into their emotions, and your concepts get over to them much more easily. And that is true for these types of intelligently people. So, typical careers, you think, oh, probably counselor, but there's psychologists, clergy persons, therapists, program planners, entrepreneurs, as well as counselors. The last one is what we call naturalist intelligence, or nature smart. These people have a sensitivity to nature. I hope you can all hear my little bird and insect chirpings here. So these people have an attunement to the natural world. They're interested in flowers, fauna, birds, animals, weather, and geological formations. These people usually have outdoor jobs. They're very sensitive to environmental issues. Some people have a green thumb and can just grow anything. And it's kind of sad because as we grow older, we tend to leave the natural world behind as we knew it as children. And we tend to bring it alive again in our hobbies, our jobs, or our interests. Typical careers people think of is farmer, but there's horticulturalists, biologists, veterinarians, winemakers, forest rangers, marine biologists, and landscapers. There are many, many jobs for this one too. This is the 9th intelligence, which Dr. Gardner isn't too sure of including yet, just because it doesn't meet the 8 criteria, which I'm going to talk about later. This one is just being sixth sense smart. So having a sensitivity to the meaning of life. These people ask the big questions. What are the ultimate life issues? What's the meaning of life, death, purpose, and love? And these big questions can penetrate many vocations and many art forms. It's been said that many kids have existential experiences but don't share them with adults because they feel adults are too busy to listen or will poo-poo them. And significant changes in adulthood bring them back. So every society has formal roles for individuals to help with these concerns in the community. Leaders of religions, gurus, theologians, yogis, medicine men, healers, shamans, sheiks, and philosophers are all possible careers in this intelligence. So young children usually experience intelligences, all 8 of them, and definitely they tend to pare down as they get older. I'm going to just whip through here. So absorption of information is how people take in their learning through their intelligence. This is Dale's cone of experience. Some of you may have seen this, but he basically says linguistic intelligence, when you read, for the general population, when you read something, you absorb 10%. If you read in here, you absorb 20%. And it goes up from there until you're actually doing, you absorb 90%. But for people strong in individual intelligences, that's probably more their mode of how they absorb that information. So I'd like to do a little math demonstration. And what I do is I have some items. Generally, when you think of math class, you think, okay, we're going to do worksheets. Yahoo! That's what some kids say, Yahoo! But math, and especially now definitely in our area of the country, math is becoming much more encompassing of different learning intelligences. So I'm going to show you a few of these things. For example, a multiplication bingo game. That speaks to people smart and body smart people because you're up, you're moving, you're playing with not just yourself memorizing multiplication, you're playing with other people. Sometimes word math programs appear more to those word smart people. So they like to translate the numbers from the word problems. For body smart people, this was a real challenge I had for one of my sons, but a lot of schools now have this grid painted on their playgrounds. And for skip counting in math, you can get the kids to count by 2s, by 4s, by 6s, by 10s on, and using their body helps them remember. For music, there's a lot of times table to rap music, to poems, to songs. It helps people remember. Pattern blocks, they work for people who are very picture smart, and it helps their fine motor skills, body smart, and just give a child a bucket of pattern blocks and they will sit there and just play and build and just reinforce those geometric concepts by themselves, just thinking it in. And I really love now that algebra is spatial. For us picture smart people, I can actually see what x squared is and x and units. And that is good. I wish I learned math that way. I probably would have done better. And it's really good for body smart people because they can manipulate with them. And for those nature smart people and body smart people, you know, group counting and borrowing from the 10s and the 100 places, you can use shells, you can use sticks, you can use rocks, and a lot of things from nature. Nets and the containers they come in really appeal to picture people because you can roll them out and actually see the surface area of those geometric solids. And for body smart people, they can play with them too. Same with place value stamps. Those work too to get people moving and for picture people. This is something I did for my child to help him learn multiplication. So these letters were about about a foot long, and I put it out on the carpet, and then I'd show him how to jump from the ones to the tens, and then we'd have little zeros as placeholders. But it really, really helped him learn through his body. And then there's your typical workbook people. And, you know, sometimes workbooks work for some people, but not always. Playing music. So when kids are doing homework and playing music in the background, it can add to their experience rather than take it away. This is math tag. So you give some kids the answers, you give some kids the questions, and you say, go tag each other on the playground. And again, geometric solids really, really help these different intelligences. So how do you tell what your strongest intelligence is? What I do is I get people to write down their interests, and very early you can see people love to do things they're good at, and they love to learn in those ways. So you can see pretty well where those categories are going to be. My university kids, I could tell pretty early the linguistically smart child loved books. Spend all their time reading and writing. The child who was interested or more bent to art would do a lot of art, and he was very, very spatial. We could go drive somewhere and he could find his way out of a neighborhood like you wouldn't believe, or read a map, and it was really, really helpful to him in playing computer games, because you have to have a certain sense of spatial awareness on a screen to know where you are for a lot of games. The Lego child who loved taking apart things and loved patterns and symbols, I could see very early he would have been very attuned to math, numbers, and logic. So, Howard Gardner talked about 5 criteria. How did he pick these is one question I had. Well, he had 8 criteria for inclusion in multiple intelligences, and that's why that Sixth Sense one isn't quite here yet. He said they all had to have symbols in the world. They all had to govern a particular part of the brain. They all had to have known people examples. They all have to start in, there has to be evidence of it in our early history of our human record and in different species. And it all had to have a distinct developmental age. You could start looking for them, and they had to be testable. So in terms of symbols, I'm not going to read all of these because you could just stop the webinar later and read them yourself. But as you look, the linguistic on the left translates to the line on the right. So in terms of symbols for linguistic intelligence, there's words, there's signs, there's languages. In terms of musical, there's musical notation. So every one of the intelligences does express in symbols. The brain areas. So for linguistic on the left side translates to the left temporal frontal lobes on the right side. Now this information comes from Dr. Thomas Armstrong's book. And there are known people. Savants are people who are really, really strong in one intelligence, incredibly strong. And these are some of them. Some people might remember the movie Rain Man or A Beautiful Mind, and those characters exhibited extreme logical number intelligence, but to the detriment of interpersonal and linguistic skills. For spatial, I would say Michelangelo was an incredible spatial artist. For body intelligence, I think of Michael Flatley, who invented river dance. For musical, who could argue Michael Jackson? He just had a beat, he just had rhythm that was just second nature. In interpersonal, and of course there's many people in all these categories. I just had to stick an example up there for all of them. But so on and so on there. and an evolutionary history. So, for example, in linguistic, we could see there was early writing about 30,000 years ago, and so on. So in spatial, there were French cave drawings that we've seen. So there is evidence in our human history of these intelligences. It's not something that's come up in the last 150 years. Okay, so I'm going to do a little discipline example. So what I do is I'm going to, sometimes with parents out there, we use our words, we nag, we talk, we remind, and we wonder why our children are not getting it. Maybe we're not speaking to their particular intelligence. So, for example, let's say your child's misbehaved for some reason. You're reasoning with your child and showing them the logical consequences of their actions. That would appeal to number smart kids. Maybe you're going to use one-on-one counseling, goal setting, and contracting with your child. So you come up with a contract. That would work for self-smart kids. Maybe you want to observe how young animals behave with their own parents in nature shows and discuss how it relates to humans getting along. That would appeal to nature-smart kids. Maybe you want to ask your child to act out the misbehavior and then act out the appropriate behavior and compare the two in role plays. That would work for body-smart kids. Maybe you just want to have a good chat. Go for a walk or go for a cup of coffee. Or ask them to tape record or write down their feelings or what they could do better in the future. That would work for word smart kids. Maybe you want to use group problem solving, family conferences. That works for people smart kids. Maybe you want to find a piece of music that contains a message you want to give your kids, or use music as an relaxing influence for a child that's out of control. Just stick that iPod on their ears when they're tantruming. That really calms down music smart kids. Or maybe you want to watch a movie with a moral to it. One good one I loved was Apollo 13, which had, whenever I want to talk to my kids about problem solving and optimism, put on that movie. It says it all for those picture smart kids. So look at the ways you're disciplined and teaching and see what would fit with your child's particular intelligence. So back to this, evidence of multiple intelligences in other species. So Gardner talks about how we see evidence in these different animals of the 8 intelligences. And I'm not going to read these out either because you can just sort of see them on the screen. And there's culturally valued end products. So all of these are things we value in our society, and they come from every one of the intelligences. So yes, we love books. Yes, we value linguistic intelligence and word smart people, but we also love art. We love the Olympics. We love speeches. We love monuments. We love songs. And we love scientific discovery. So we have to value everybody's intelligence. And there is, where do you see these intelligences in children? So linguistic usually starts from when kids acquire language, so age 2 to 3, all the way up. Logical, like I said, you see more in the teens when they get their abstract thinking skills, their formal operation. Spatial, 18 months on. As soon as they can hold a pencil, you can start to see art and pictures. Body, of course, as soon as a child starts moving and walking and getting into things, can be a little earlier than 18 months. Musical, children can start holding an instrument and understanding notes from some kids from age 3 on to elderly. Interpersonal, you see that from birth on because they're interacting with their parents and caregivers. Intrapersonal, when children start developing a self-awareness, when they can recognize they're a separate person from their parent, which is about age 1 and on. Nature, 18 months and onward. And existential, probably about 5 years when they start asking the questions, and they're in that why phase. Why? Learning opportunities. I hate to say disabilities because it sounds like it's a bad thing, but as I said before in the beginning, we shine in this model. We shine in some areas, and we have disabilities in some areas. And that's okay because, especially with technology now, we can rise above it. So, like intelligences, learning disabilities affect specific parts of the brain, and they can go undetected in a particular intelligence because a lot of the testing for learning disabilities, tests reading, writing, picture, spatial, they don't test for body, kinesthetic, or music, or interpersonal much in disabilities. But there are many ways to overcome it. So bypass it. So especially now in schools, we're finding it's great that people are learning in different ways, and you don't have to sit down and write a test. You can have a scribe. You can have a lot of accommodations. The knowledge is still in the brain, but to get it out, we can get it out in a lot of ways that are fit with the intelligences. We can compensate by using another intelligence. A good example of that was the movie The Blind Side, where the football player, he passed all his exams, but the teachers just needed a different way to extract that information from him and his knowledge other than from writing a physical paper test. And there's lots of resources. There's books for developing. There's organizations like Toastmasters for speaking. There's computer software like Kurzweil that will read textbooks. There's games. There's technology such as Dragon that can help write for people who want to speak. There's many electronics, and there's getting more all the time, which is a good thing. Are there gender differences in this? Yes, to some extent it's nature and it's nurture. So this again is from Gardner and Armstrong, where girls tend to talk faster. They tend to be have more of an edge in their linguistic intelligence. Boys tend to speak about their emotions more through their body, where girls will use words. On the other side, boys are more logical and spatial, but just very slightly. In terms of, and that may explain why boys like video games more. Maybe that's a socialization thing though. Body intelligence, it's still boys and girls equally. Same with musical. Interpersonal, girls have a bit of an edge just because we don't know if that's socialization, but girls tend to, if you've ever had a birthday party with 10 girls, they all sit together and talk. You have a birthday party with 10 boys, your house is trashed. Boys, interpersonal, slightly ahead in that one, just because they start to get to know themselves a bit more, and the other two are equally the same. Barriers to developing intelligences. As adults, we're too busy. So we may work as an engineer, but we don't have time to play our guitar in a band if we're out on the road all the time traveling for work. So we may leave it until retirement, or we may find it later in life. And there were definitely more late bloomers in their intelligences. Parent disapproval. Now that's a big one for body or music or nature. Parents tend to not quite like it when kids are going to be video game testers, or they're going to quit school and join a band, or they're going to be an actor or a model. And that may slowly trickle down to kids, but those kids do very well in that intelligence too. And same with society disapproval. There's definitely, video games right now are looked at as frivolous and non-educational, and yet there's a huge opening there for teaching kids through video games that is probably going to come up as the next crop of developers and teachers come through and have grown up with that tool. So learning styles versus multiple intelligences. If you learn visually, you're probably smart in spatial, logical, and linguistic. If you learn auditorily, you're probably smart in linguistic, musical, and interpersonal. And if you're a kinesthetic learner, you're probably a nature smart, interpersonal, and body smart. So, teaching concepts. What can you use for different intelligent people? I'm not going to read all these, but I'll just give you a minute to look at them in the screen. And these are some things to vary your teaching to make it much more interactive rather than PowerPoints. For number and people smart, here are some things. I have to say, using skits and role plays and props and costumes really work. I thought they worked when I did groups with teenagers, but it's amazing how adults really love that stuff too. When you teach adults and you bring out a costume bucket and they get to devise a skit, they love it. It brings them back to their creativity and a lot of their strong intelligences. Props are really good. I use a lot of props when I speak. So here's some for picture and self-smart. And the last two, body and nature smart. So acting out with puppets, giving them scripts to read. Nature is kind of nice. These are things to have in hand while you're teaching, and it just brings a little more of nature into the classroom or the speaking hall. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is just wrap up a little bit that every person is intelligent and we should celebrate it. Every person is gifted. When people ask me or tell me that they're sending their child to a school for gifted kids, and I ask them, oh, in what intelligence are they gifted? They kind of look at me funny. And then I talk about, oh, there's different kinds of intelligences. But I want to end. I'm going to read a little poem, and I want to end on that, and then we'll open it up for questions. So the poem starts. Actually, it's a story. It's not a poem. Sorry. There once was a story about animals who decided to create a school for climbing, flying, running, swimming, and digging. They couldn't agree on which subject was the most important, so they said that all the students had to take the same curriculum. The rabbit was an expert in running, but almost drowned in swimming class. The experience shocked her so much that she could never run as well after that. The eagle was a whiz at flying, but of course, when he showed up for digging class, he was so inadequate to the task that he got assigned to a digging remediation program. It took up so much of his time that he soon forgot how to fly. And so on with the other animals. The animals no longer had the opportunity to shine in their areas of expertise because all were forced to do things that did not respect their individual nature. In much the same way, we're doing that with our children, neglecting their gifts and talents while at the same time forcing them to waste hours in remediation classes. Eagles are meant to fly. So I just want to thank everyone for joining me, and I'd love to answer questions if people want to open that up.
Amazing. Perfect. Thank you so much, Judy. Oh my gosh, I even love that story at the end there. I feel like there's so many parents and teachers on this call that came on with the intention to learn something about their children or learn something to teach their children, but they're probably learning it about themselves as well, because there's so much in here